Pokemon Go Plus Plus. I guess the naming could have been worse. They could have put a U on it. Now, when that Pokeball came out for Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, I did a video opening it up and taking a look at what was going on inside. So I figured, you know what? Let's continue to the tradition here with these accessories coming out of the Pokemon Company and Nintendo and see exactly what they didn't tell us about the Go Plus Plus. So if you enjoy, I guess, the look inside of the newest Pokemon Sleep and Pokemon Go accessory, leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you're new. So when this initially came out, it was pretty difficult for me to find this, and I noticed they did kind of pop up online for slightly more than they were supposed to be going at retail, so I just figured I'd wait until I randomly saw it one day, and I was walking through a Best Buy and they had a couple of them, so that's basically how I ended up with it here, and maybe why I'm doing it a little later than the release day. But oh, look at that. That's actually a pretty nice touch. I mean, packaging is packaging. You end up throwing it out in the end most of the time. But I don't know, that's kind of fun to have sort of the little artwork here of Pikachu sleeping. Of course, this really being geared towards the idea of Pokemon Sleep. So it'll track your sleeping rather than having your phone on your bed. You'd be able to use this. It, of course, pairs with your phone. And it also works with a Pokemon Go where it can throw Pokeballs and that sort of thing when you're walking around. And it's just sort of, okay, it's just sort of under pressure held there. And then we have, okay, USB Type A to C charge cable. And I believe this is the wrist strap. You also have this little clip that I guess the wrist strap just kind of attaches to. It's a couple of magnets there. I guess that way you can kind of just attach it to a belt or something and walk around with it that way. Onto the main unit itself. It does have a nice glossy look to it, although I'm not a huge fan of glossy plastics, because especially something like this, it's gonna probably get scratched up, especially if you're on the go with it, or if it's in, you just leave it in your pocket with some keys or something. So yeah, that's not gonna look great in, I mean, honestly, a couple of weeks. The back is like a nice matte finish. That's, again, how I prefer to have the entire thing. Although I guess this is easier to grip, so it does at least have that kind of glossy texture to it for holding on. But otherwise, the button in the middle does have this kind of glowing effect. And there's one other button at the top, which, from what I can tell with the instructions, when you press it, it gives you an indication as to the battery life. That's kind of a yellow light that's blinking twice. And according to the manual, that means the battery is greatly reduced. So let's talk about how you get into the Plus Plus. And from what I can tell, there's two very fine Phillips head screws here. And I don't really see any others around it necessarily. So try taking these out and maybe it starts to unclip. Definitely feels like it's loosened up with those screws out. I'm just gonna take a plastic spudger and see if I can maybe start to loosen it somewhat. We are getting some movement here, so most likely we just have some clips that, as I sort of push this spudger around, should start to release. So it just popped off. I want to be at least a little careful because there's probably some cable going to the top here. Yeah, okay, so right at the top, they just had this basically sticker right here holding it down a bit, so that's what was kind of keeping it secure to this guy. Otherwise, though, there's just a couple of clips. Actually, there's really just one right up there. And okay, we have another smaller one here, and then the two screw spots there. I removed the little screws that were holding the top piece on with that board. And I mean, we can see one solid button here, and then we have 4 LED lights actually going around it, and those look to be RGB, I believe, so they should be able to change to different colors. You can kind of see it as, well, at least I can, as they light up. We also have what appears to be, I guess, an antenna that's running down and around through here. So I'll unclip this board and see if we can start pulling what look to be, I mean, a ton of different screws all around here holding stuff down. Okay, so first thing coming out is the battery. It was plugged in there when I unplugged it, and this looks to be, oh, it's a Joy-Con battery. I mean, it makes sense. I'm sure Nintendo has plenty of these laying around. 525 milliamp hours there. And for the most part, especially with Joy-Cons or others, they've been able to make these batteries last pretty well. So it makes sense. You might as well throw it in something like this that can support it. Also, I'm going to give them some credit here. The USB-C port is just its own board completely. And I don't really know how much people are going to just replace this board on its own if maybe you break the charge port or something when you're plugging it in, or with kids maybe grabbing it at an angle. But the fact that this is a separate board away from either the main board or even the supporting board down here, just for overall repairability, it's good. I know this is still a new product, so they should be readily available, but down the road, like, think about the Pokewalker thing that was with Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Those are harder to find now, and maybe in 10 or 15 years, this will also be hard to find. So any step they take when it comes to repairability, such as the charge port being on a separate board and not soldered down completely to the main board, I think is a good thing. All right, so with 3 more screws out, the bottom board also comes up, and we can see the antenna that plugs here runs to the top, where we have our button board and all of this. Main board is right here. So we have chips on here that would track motion or movement for your sleep. And what's interesting is I've noticed that there is some frustration, we can say, with this device when it comes to the vibration. I've seen some people want to just get rid of it completely, disable it. I mean, you can technically do that, I guess, just by removing this rumble motor right here. So you would just have to come in and, I guess you clip these, or you can just desolder them. So you could technically put it back, but it is odd to me, unless they've done it through an update or something, that there was no way to disable that in software. Okay, now that we have the board out of the shell, let's talk about what exactly is going on here with these different chips. So dead center, we have one that's QFAAE0. That appears to be the Bluetooth SoC, of course, for syncing up to your phone or anything there, and then communicating back and forth to either Pokemon Sleep or Pokemon Go. This one in particular has a WinBond chip. Now, this would be the flash memory for storing information on the board. And then further down, there is what appears to be a power management chip. That's CKPTI288. So, of course, for charging or anything there. I was looking around for, I guess, what would be the accelerometer, as in order to track your sleep, your phone would use its accelerometer for detecting different movement and stuff that's happening, which is the reason you have to put your phone face down, right, on your bed, at least somewhat near you. In this instance, you'd use the Go Plus Plus in place of your phone on your bed, and there is kind of this unmarked chip. Well, it's slightly unmarked. It just has SE and then like 23 on it, but it doesn't have any other identifiers, and I guess that could be the accelerometer, and that's probably what I would lean towards. Unfortunately, I don't have the identifier to necessarily look that chip up. And as mentioned before, you can see where that antenna attaches and then runs to that Bluetooth chip. Well, the antenna receiver is around the top of the Pokemon Go Plus Plus, and it sort of sits right around where that red or white stripe would be, which is, I think, a better spot for the receiver, considering it wouldn't be in your palm, it would be on the outside of it, and should have pretty good overall reception there. So 2 things I want to comment on here with this Go Plus Plus accessory. One, it does feel like there is a lot of effort put into it in terms of the quality for the build. They use 20 screws for this. 20 screws for an accessory this small is a lot, and I feel like most of that is going into it feeling like a solid product, not needing maybe a bunch of plastic clips necessarily to hold down some of these more important pieces, like these 2 main boards, like your charge port. Even the button itself is anchored down by 2 screws. Again, these are all things that are not necessarily common for an accessory of this size. The other thing, it does not appear to be waterproof or even water resistant, I would say. They probably could have done some things, maybe rubber gaskets, for example, around this guy or other ways. So keep that in mind. I mean, most people are probably looking at this saying, you know, I'm not going to jump in the pool with it in my pocket, but it could still happen, right? I mean, it happens with phones and stuff all the time. This also, I remember with the Pokewalkers, consistently went through the wash. For some reason, that's just something that would always be brought up when people would come in to tell me about some of the stuff they were experiencing with the different Pokemon games or anything. Oh, yeah, that Pokewalker, yeah, it was in my pocket and I put it through the wash. So keep that in mind, all right? You don't want to get this wet, but otherwise, the build quality is really, really good for, well, something with a questionable name. Also, I do like that they really committed to like the front LED look for the Pokeball, so much so that they had 4 different RGB lights centered right around here, so you get that really nice glow effect. But let me know what you guys thought about the Pokemon Go Plus. Naming aside, did you pick one up? Have you been using it? Because I will admit, I'm quite impressed with what they were able to put together here in this fairly small package. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.